Hello, it's great to see you again. Today I want to quickly review another barnstormer of an appearance in the media by Kellie-Jay. She appeared on GBN, and the person that she appeared with, I mean, I've never heard of this Tom something. Apparently he's made a little bit of an idiot of himself on social media. I do think that these men, they see this as a career path. It's like that James Max that she was in the, I reviewed her interview with him last week. Controversy in social media means clicks, means views, means likes, dislikes, doesn't matter. All the algorithm picks up is that people have engaged with this content. So these people are deliberately provocative, deliberately controversial, deliberately misogynist. And the reason why is A, it's popular. There's a lot of people that find this content compelling. But also, it's an easier way to get famous than to have skills and stuff, I guess. So, that being said, let's listen to the interview.
Schools across the country have recently updated their trans admissions policy in what they say is an attempt to protect their school's status as a single-sex institution. The trust decided that transgender girls will not be given admission.
So this is discussing a recent document by the Girls' Day School Trust. I'm an old girl of one of the day schools that's part of this trust, and I'm very, very pleased to see that these schools are able to enforce the Equality Act specific legislation which allows for them to offer single-sex experiences for girls. I just wish that the state sector, where you're not having to pay these extortionate sums of money in order to get an education for your child, I wish they would have the same kind of fortitude, so that all of our girls can benefit, not just this tiny number of girls who are lucky to come from families with enough money to send them there, or like me, were scholarship girls.
Decided that transgender girls will not be given admission.
While the move follows a broader debate about the inclusion of transgender people in women's spaces and whether the inclusion of trans-identified women infringes on the right to biological women and their right to single-sex spaces.
I love that the presenter there actually made clear these are legal rights that we've already won. These are not things that we're asking for that we didn't have before. These are legal rights that we've already won, and all we're doing is defending against an assault.
Kellie-Jay is a women's rights activist and founder of Standing for Women, a campaign in favour, or rather what they describe as to protect biological women and single-sex spaces.
This guy doesn't look old enough to be allowed out on his own. I mean, I've got that thing that you get in middle age where you lose the ability to tell the difference between an 18-year-old and a 23-year-old and a 27-year-old. They're all very young to me now, but he looks very young. What possible life experience could he have that would qualify him to take part in a discussion with a women's rights campaigner about women's legal rights to single-sex accommodations in education? Let's find out.
Welcome to the programme. First of all, do you see how some people could see a blanket policy with no exceptions for particular individuals seems to be a bit hasty here?
Oh, I get it. Don't be hasty.
Hasty.
There's no point having a single-sex school if you include both sexes.
I mean, I just love this woman. She's direct, she's forthright, and she's just honest. She's just honest. And she speaks in plain language. She's not making it difficult. She's not invoking academic theory. She's not making reference to, some obscure writer. She's just telling the truth. And how often do you get that?
There's no point having a single-sex school if you include both sexes. So blanket, I don't really see how else it could operate. You just, no boys in girls' schools, full stop.
Me and Tom spoke about this about an hour and a half ago, and we had quite a fiery, very civil, but a fiery debate on it, because I suppose that what we were trying to get at is, how do you define women? I think the question you posed to me was, well, what do you mean by when you say a biological woman, for example? And it's those fundamental questions, I feel, that people sort of have arguments about all of the time. Do you understand why, you know, somebody like who might share Tom's views has an issue with saying things like biological man who identifies?
The reason why people like Tom have an issue with saying things like biological man is because they are desperate to obscure the reality of the fact that we are a sexually dimorphic species, because it's only by obscuring that reality, by making fantasy claims such as people are born in the wrong bodies or trans women are women, it's only by making these fantasy claims that their ideology makes any sense at all. Because if you take it back to the bare facts, as Kellie-Jay does, what you're advocating for is putting men in women's prisons. What you're advocating for is putting men on women's swimming teams. What you're advocating for is putting men in positions where they're going on school trips with guide trips with young girls, where you're putting men, boys into girls' schools. Makes it really, really clear, and that's why the opposite side really hate it when we talk about biological sex.
Do you understand why, you know, somebody like who might share Tom's views has an issue with saying things like biological man who identifies as a woman, and thinks we should just say trans woman?
I think we should just say man. I think that's a perfect descriptor for people in this country who are, or all over the world, who are adult human males. They are men. I think the difficulty, especially for someone like Tom, is he seems to think that women are just men without penises, and we're not. We're actually a complete sex class and biological thing all of our own. We are not defined against what a man is. We are women. And if we stopped using silly language like trans women, trans-identified males, male-bodied, all these euphemistic terms for men and women, we'd have a much more straightforward conversation. Are boys allowed in girls' schools? No. When you start saying things like trans girls, which frankly I think transitioning of children is a profound child abuse.
There aren't enough people in the media describing child transition as child abuse, and I'm here for it all day long. It is absolutely abusive.
To lie to little boys and little girls and tell them that they'll grow up to be the opposite sex is frankly preposterous and abusive in the most profound manner. To tell sort of lie.
Do you not think that the most profound and abusive thing is you talking to trans people, to trans women, and calling them men?
I mean, it's pretty offensive, the fact that she's not allowed to get a flipping word out before he's in there with his interruptions and insinuations, that she's just essentially not being kind enough. She's not... See, a woman means nurturer, woman means kindness, woman means passive receptacle for views, opinions and penises that can be thrust at you at any hour of the night or day. That's what Tom thinks of women. And when women stand up and say, no, actually, you know, I have a body of my own, I have an integrity of my own as a person, and I have full humanity like any man does. That is incredibly threatening, because the patriarchy only works on the basis that we're less than human compared with the actual proper humans, the ones with the external appendage.
And quite frankly, rude position to take, and one that's held by
I don't really care whether or not it's rude, Tom.
It's extraordinary, and quite frankly, it's rude to call a man a man. I love it. She says, I don't really care if it's seen as rude, Tom. Absolutely. I refer you to our fabulous departed friend, Magdalene Byrne.
I'd rather be rude than a fucking liar.
No, it's rude, Tom.
of people, because the vast majority of people are very open and generous and accepting. It's a very small minority.
No, the elite that he mixes with, who have the luxury of luxury beliefs like trans women are women, who will never find themselves in need of a women's refuge, who will never find themselves going to a women's prison, who will never find themselves at the sharp end of having children housed with a foster family that consists of paraphiliac men. He will never experience the disbenefits of this ideology. So of course in his circles everybody goes along with it very nicely, thank you very much. The arrogance to assume that that's true for all circles, in all social classes, in all social strata, it's just so stereotypically British, white, male, upper middle class. I mean, you know, I've seen this before.
And quite frankly rude position to take, and one that's held
Well,
by
I don't really
a
care
very
whether or not
small
it's rude,
minority
Tom.
of people, because the vast majority of people are very open and generous and accepting. It's a very small minority.
No, they're not.
Who would choose to say
No, they're not.
that
That's
trans
absolutely
women
not
are
true.
men.
Let's be very
18%,
clear.
according to
Let's be very clear. When it comes to vulnerable people, so if you ask a 60-year-old man in this country, do you want a man who calls himself a woman to go to your mother's home and do the cleaning when she's in the home on her own? He'll say no. Do you want a man to be in a hospital ward with a vulnerable
That's an
patient?
extraordinary
He will say
position
no.
to be taking. It's one that most people in this country would find quite abhorrent.
Most people in this country haven't been captured by this ideology. So even where some of our institutions have been captured by clever political manoeuvring, which means that it has become unsayable in many of the professions and in lots of workplaces that a trans woman is a man that either has paraphilia or a serious mental illness or perhaps some kind of adjustment disorder that went untreated. It is absolutely incredible that these people believe that you can compel the beliefs of a whole bunch of people. I mean, let's look at our history in Britain, okay? So, you know, we're talking about, I'm thinking back to like Queen Elizabeth I, Mary Queen of Scots, right? Two half-sisters who both burned a whole lot of the population while they were queens. So, you know, you've got people saying, right, well, you know, I think the whole entire country should be Catholic and I'm going to burn people that are Protestant. And then you've got someone else saying, well, I think the whole country should be Protestant and I'm going to burn anybody that's a Catholic. I mean, you have people trying to convert the beliefs of the population through the threat of being burned alive. And they still couldn't compel people to believe what they thought people should believe. And that's why freedom of belief is so important, and it's integral in our culture. And the fact that this tiny subculture, this gender ideology, this gender religion has taken hold of these people's brains and has made them believe that somehow you can compel the thoughts and beliefs of the population who have the right, the human right, to believe or not believe in the thing that you believe or don't believe in. This is fundamental. We couldn't have a diverse society where we tolerate and include people who have different religions unless we had that religious freedom. So what these people are arguing for is essentially totalitarianism. So like Queen Elizabeth I or Mary Queen of Scots, they're going to burn you if you're not a Catholic, or they're going to burn you if you're not a Protestant. This is, you know, we're going to wipe out any semblance of people who think a different way, who have a different set of genuine, you know, passionately held beliefs. And, you know, we need to learn from history that this is not going to work. You may have people who will pay lip service. That may be the best you can hope for. And I think that what they've done is they've gambled on the idea that they will become so politically powerful so quickly that forcing people to pay lip service will result in a veneer of social permission for these luxury beliefs. Perhaps they never actually cared whether or not people genuinely believed in it. Perhaps it was only ever about forcing people to say what you want them to say. What an expression of social control that is. What an incredible manifestation of political will that is. That I'm going to force you, even in your own homes, to declare belief in something which flies in the face of everything you know about science, everything you know about attraction, everything you know about human bodies, which we've all lived in all our lives. You know, it really is incredible. And I do think that when this is all over and the dust has settled, the books that will be written about this time will be fascinating, and it will be studied. I mean, you know, it's that ancient Confucius curse, may you live in interesting times, isn't it?
True. I don't know where you get your information. Perhaps you ought to spend some time off Twitter.
Perhaps you ought to spend some time looking at data and British polling council polls.
If you could allow me to finish my sentence, that would be great. Most adults in this country are perfectly aware of what a man and a woman is. Now, some people may afford people who call themselves trans the polite way, or what they might call polite or kindness, and refer to them by their chosen names and by their chosen pronouns. People may do that as a courtesy. But we are so far beyond what is courteous. What started off as courtesy and kindness has led to an absolute decimation of women's rights.
I can only assume that you don't have any trans friends, that you've never met anyone.
Oh God, this again. First off, nobody ever defines trans. Like, you haven't got any trans friends. What does that mean? What does that mean? You know, what is the difference between a bloke who puts on a dress and says that his name is Mary and a bloke that puts on a dress and knows it's just a game and a dress up? Because that is still a bloke. What happens if the bloke that calls himself Mary gets a set of silicone implants put into his body to resemble female breasts? Isn't that just dress up to the extreme? What if he decides to go in for a cosmetic surgery which will involve castration and drilling a hole into his perineum in order for other men to use it for penetration? He's still, like, what? He's still a man. That operation hasn't changed anything. You know, sometimes people claim magical properties of hormones, and again, it's just like, you know, various heretical religious beliefs through history where, you know, you say these words or you do this thing and literally that wafer turns into the literal body of Christ, or you know, you arrange certain things in a certain order and you say these words and it becomes a spell that makes somebody do something or makes something happen in the world. And you know, this is a similar thing, isn't it? What's the difference? These hormones are not magic potions. They are very dangerous, carcinogenic, tetragenic chemicals, which are being accessed by people that are not seeking out the treatment that might actually result in them adjusting to a healthy life in their body without surgical and medical intervention. It's just terribly sad.
I can only assume that you don't have any trans friends, that you've never met anyone who is trans.
Well, I might assume you don't know any women.
If you were to walk past someone in the street who was trans, how on earth would you be able to tell?
Are you kidding me? I love the way that Kellie-Jay, like, when people say ridiculous things, she just laughs, or she just smiles. Sometimes she doesn't need to say it, because none of us that have ever walked down the street where we've seen somebody who would call themselves a trans woman, I mean, it's always fairly clear. Maybe there's been occasions where someone has had such a fantastically successful dress-up career that they have actually fooled people. But it's, you know, it's bred into us through hundreds and thousands and millions of years of evolution that we can recognise male and female. You know, our gaits are different, our proportions are different, the size of us is different, the size of our limbs is different, the way we move, the way we hold ourselves in a social situation, the way we speak, the things we talk about, the things that we do. You know, all of this stuff has been developed through billions of years of evolution and then thousands of years of social evolution to result in a situation where it's really bloody obvious who is a man and who is a woman. It's incredible that an ideology has caused us to get to the point. And I remember when I was prepared to lie to people and say that you could be some kind of a woman if you really, really, really wanted to, because, you know, you think, well, maybe it's true that some people have this thing called gender identity. I don't have it, but maybe some people do. I'll have to do a video sometime and share with you my journey from when I was on board with these luxury beliefs to my crone self now, where I will not tolerate it, because it's a story in itself.
You would, of course,
do you honestly think that most women don't recognise men? Do you honestly think the human race has got this far without recognising biological sex? We do it in a matter of seconds.
What do you mean by biological sex? I don't check you for your chromosomes.
Don't be ridiculous. What do you mean by biological sex? I mean that one sex is the sex that produces ova, gestates and nurtures young. And the other sex produces sperm. And sometimes that developmental pathway, for whatever reason, doesn't result in the production of eggs or sperm, but they're still male or female. If you're a sterile man or a sterile woman, you're still a man or a woman. You're not. There's no speg. There's no third gamete.
Sex. I don't check you for your chromosomes. I look at you and see you as a woman.
You fully well
if
know
I were to
that
see
I'm a
someone
female
walking
just
down
by
the
looking
street
at me
who
and
had
talking to me.
secondary
How
sex
ridiculous.
characteristics of a female, I would say they were female.
She's got 4 children. I'm fairly certain that she's got 2 X chromosomes, but I don't need to know that. I can look at her and see that she's a woman. I mean, you could.
Of a female, I would say they were female.
Okay, well, look, let's go back to, obviously this is a heated conversation, and this sort of exemplifies the sorts of conversations people are always having about this issue. And let me just ask you this: what do you make of this idea? Because I believe, actually, Tom, you call trans people one of the most vulnerable groups in this country. I'm assuming that's something you stand by, Tom. And people who take his view would say, actually, a lot of these people are very vulnerable, and all they're saying is to, you know, we want some rights, we want some access. What do you make of that? Do you consider trans people to be one of the most vulnerable groups?
Well, for a start, there's more women who are victims of sexual assault than there are men that call themselves women. So I think when we talk about vulnerability in spaces, we always have to centre those women. Frankly, when I hear people like Tom talking about erasing the boundaries of biological girls and women, big red flags shoot off in my head. And I'm wondering whether he's ever really considered an 11, 12, 13-year-old girl going through puberty and the embarrassment of that, and the really unique way that girls in particular change through puberty. And as a mother of 4, I can tell you the striking difference between the sexes is no further apparent than in puberty. So I think we have to be really careful when we are waxing lyrical, trying to score woke points by erasing the boundaries of girls. We have an epidemic of sexual assault in our schools. Half of the girls report sexual assault or sexual harassment, in schools, and the rest of them, it's so frequent they don't even bother. How could we possibly further infringe upon these girls' boundaries? It's frankly just grotesque.
Well, I have to say, well, I'm afraid we've run out of time on that interview, I'm being told. But Kellie-Jay Keen, thank you for your forthright views there. I have to say, some of which were fairly provocative.
To some.
I do find it extraordinary that we're saying that an average girl going through puberty has a more traumatic experience than someone going through the anguish of realising that they're transgender. I think that's
I don't think it's the trauma, but it's certainly, I think her point was the fact that it's a profound biological transformation, so to speak, the puberty, and it's not something to be taken lightly.
As men in that way, I think that was needlessly provocative and quite frankly rude.
I think it's quite funny that first of all that the provocative and rude are the words used, the adjectives used to describe Kellie-Jay Keen's performance there, just because she totally trounced him in that debate, and he's kind of embarrassed because, you know, he's an important journalist and she's just a mum of four. But it's absolutely crackers, isn't it? It's absolutely crackers. How on earth did we get here? So, it's always so much fun to review Kellie-Jay in the media, and I just think, you know, let's get her on the telly as much as possible, on as many channels as possible, because, you know, she's amazing. I mean, she also does this live streaming on YouTube. I think she does it every night. It seems like it's every weeknight. And I think it's amazing because it's not easy to do live broadcasting, and she just does it like, you know, at the drop of a hat. So, you know, very, very impressive woman, and an absolute gift to the movement. I am always really disappointed when our prominent feminist campaigners are kind of dismissive of her, and it often feels a little bit classist and a little bit like anti-natalist and a little bit, just a bit sneery, because you know, we have to be a movement that caters for all women, and so some of us will have done, you know, PhDs in feminist theory and will be absolutely hot shit on the academic side of things. And of course those women are absolutely essential in the movement, and they do incredible work to help to move the understanding of women forward and to promote feminism in the mainstream. But then there's a whole lot of other women whose expertise comes through working in women's services, who are probably the strongest feminists that you'll ever meet in your life. And those women may or may not have any qualifications in feminism. And then there are another group of women who get into feminism because of their treatment through pregnancy and childbirth and raising their children. You know, all of those perspectives are valid. You know, the woman who has had a lifetime of campaigning against FGM may not have done any exams in feminism. She bloody well knows what she's speaking about, you know? And in the same way, you know, Kellie-Jay Keen, she's a mother of four, and she has paid attention in her life. So not only does she have a degree in religious studies, which enables her to discuss a religious ideology, and gender religion is another religion, but she has the authority that comes with a lived experience, and she has particular talents that make her a very good media performer. It's just a different flavour of feminism. We've got to be a movement that accepts all kinds of women. We fight for all women. We represent all women. And we have streams that are accessible to all women. So it could be that her audience is different to another feminist audience, and that's absolutely fine. We all bring our own thing to this movement, and that's when we're strongest, when we recognise the unique talents and skills that we all bring. Let's get Kellie-Jay on the telly more often. Thank you for watching my content. I really appreciate your support. It would be great if you could take the time to like or dislike the video. I'd love it if you shared it. Do leave a comment down below if you like. As usual, the references are all in the description box if you want to follow up any of the references that I've talked about today. Thanks so much for joining me to look at this video. I'll see you again soon.